workshop being held today, April 25th. Time is 5:36. Budget presentation, Mr. Tony Reza.
Yes, sir. Vice President Guerra, Dr. Espinosa, members of the board. Tonight, we're going to continue reviewing the budgets that will be adopted by the board for the 2017-18 school year, as well as talk about two additional budgets. So what you have here is the agenda for tonight's presentation. We'll go over pending legislative bills, review the general fund revenue estimates. We'll go in detail with respect to the budgets that will be adopted by the board in June. Those are in bold, as well as discuss the workers' comp and the healthcare fund budgets. We'll talk about competition proposal and their fiscal impact, and we'll just briefly talk about the agenda for the May 9th budget workshop that we'll have at that time. Okay. So with respect to the legislative update, just what I have in black or in bold are really just updates from the prior workshop that we have. So with respect to legislative update, you have House Bill 21 by Representative Huberty. That is the main driver right now with respect to state funding on the House side. It's gone up from $1.6 to $1.8 billion in additional funding for school district public education. And you'll see what it does. It does increase the basic allotment. It'll eliminate the transportation, high school, and staff salary allotments. It will lower recapture for property wealthy school districts. It'll provide a hardship grant for those districts that are suffering from a loss of ASETAR funding. It increases the weight for bilingual. It adds a weight for students with dyslexia. It also expand CTE funding into the 8th grade. It also, which this is new since the last time I talked to you, it eliminates the small school district penalty, but that'll be phased in over 6 years. And also, it'll increase the new instructional facilities allotment from $250 per student to $1,000, okay? And that's on a prorated basis. And what I mean by that is that they allocated $30 million for NIFA last biennium, but they didn't use it all because not many schools are open, not many districts are opening schools. So what they're saying is that to the extent that you'll get $1,000 per student, but if there's a lot of new schools that open up, they'll prorate it based on what's allocated in that particular fund. With respect to the Senate side, there is a new bill by Senator Taylor, House Senate Bill 2145. What that does, it provides the same basic allotment for students district statewide. It'll increase funding for the bilingual, SPED, state compensatory education, and career technology allocation, as well as transportation. I didn't put that in there. So I'm going to move this way because if not, I'm going to get some feedback. It also is based on tax effort as well. So it multiplies that amount by the tax rate that the school district is imposing. The higher the tax rate, the more funding. What's important to note is that school districts with an M&O tax rate below $1 get penalized, just like Socorro, okay? It eliminates the different tiers, but it does not provide any additional funding for public education at this point in time. Now, this is advocated and favored by the Equity Center since they basically developed the plan. So it provides equity, just not additional revenue for the public education system. And if it's implemented, then we're going to lose some money here because our M&O tax rate is below $1. So what's next? You'll have both houses, both chambers selecting their own subcommittees to meet and come to a compromise bill, okay? Now, how they're doing this, both are using the Financial Foundation School Program delay. In other words, they're pushing off the August 2019 payment into September. However, the House uses $2.5 billion of the rainy day fund, while the Senate is transferring $2.5 billion or delaying the transfer to the highway fund. And that was just ruled to be constitutional recently by the Attorney General's office. When I created this presentation, we weren't sure it was constitutional because the Senate had asked the Attorney General to rule on it, and he's come back and said it is constitutional. So we may not have an actual budget until maybe the end of May. And that certainly plays a part of how we're going to roll out our particular funding, okay? Now, these are our revenue estimates, and they will change. By the time we get in May, we'll get updated information with respect to our property values. We'll get our preliminary values at the end of this week. We should. We've already received our finalized comptroller's values. It's lower, so we're going to probably get at this point in time an additional $200,000 in state funding. I'm looking at the collection tax rate. I mean, I'm using 98.5%. I may go up to 99%. I'm not sure yet. Historically, the last 5 years, we've always collected more than what we budgeted because I used 98%. I don't know yet, but it's something that might be considered. Yes, sir.
Mr. Gibb. Could we get a figure for both house bills to see which one will affect us the worst?
Yes, sir. And yes, sir. What I know for a fact is that with respect to, House Bill 21, we know that the legislative run says it will generate about $5.4 million in additional revenue over and above what we have budgeted currently. Moken Casey is stating that it's going to be about $6 million that we're going to get. As for the the Senate bill, I'll see if I can get some information. I don't think there's going to be any additional revenue. There isn't. All it's going to do is really just equalize some of the funding. And it could be that we might lose some money. But I'll see if I can get some information on the Senate bill for you.
And do we need, do we have any idea where the Senate is standing on this?
Well, I know that the Senate leadership is favoring not providing additional funding. They want to make sure the budget is where it's at. But I do think that because there's such an outcry with respect to doing something about public education funding formulas for both property wealthy and property poor school districts, that I think they're going to do something about approving the House bill side. That's just my personal opinion. But we'll see what happens. So anyway, so just keep in mind that our revenue estimates will change, but this is what currently we have. We have $360 million in revenue. That's an increase of 16.6 over our current revised budget. I'm going to briefly go over some of these. The current taxes, $4.4 million increase because of increased property values. Prior year taxes, that's a decrease because of historically we've been collecting about $600,000 for the last couple of years, so I'm budgeting reality here. With respect to the 5711 per capita apportionment, that's generated by the oil and gas leases that we have in the permanent school fund, and that's controlled by the State Board of Education. They allocate a certain amount to school districts. But whenever they increase it, there's a corresponding decrease in the foundation school program. Whenever they decrease it, there's a corresponding increase in the FSP. So there was a decrease this time, so that's why you see an increase in the foundation school program. First of all, it's that shift from the per capita. Also, we have an increase in our average daily attendance, which generate more state revenue. And there's also a change in the funding formula. Tier 2 funding, the Austin yield, they're going from $77 per WADA to $99 per WADA. So there's an increase in there as well. And that increase is in both appropriation bills of the Senate and the House. So stands to reason it's going to be there. And then also you'll see an increase in our SHARS funding. We've generated some additional revenue and we're budgeting reality, so to speak. So you're seeing an increase of about $16.6 million in our projected revenues for the general fund. Now, with respect to our budget, our cost drivers, this hasn't changed. In our budget currently, we have an increase of 1.5% for our staff. You're looking at additional instructional salaries for career technology and also end of course at the high school. Those are additional positions, instructional positions at the campuses. We also have additional salaries for the early college high school at Americas. We've increased $25 per student. Our contribution for the employees by $300 per year for our healthcare fund, so you're looking at a $300 per employee increase. We've budgeted an increase in our WIN program because we're adding a grade level. Startup salaries for the new elementary school, increases in utilities, and we've also added $500,000 for classroom furniture replacement. You'll see the increases in some of the departments, and so we added some additional staff because of our growth. We are continually growing. We've grown significantly. And so it's important for us to make sure that we don't we have to sell appropriately. So what you have here is what's in our budget. What we've added since the last meeting is 13 FTEs for special education with respect to teachers, diagnosticians, social workers, an adaptive PE coach, and a speech therapist. So with respect to SPED, we've contributed and we've invested a lot. Our budget's gone up about $7 million in the last 3 to 4 years because of the fact that we also have we have a reputation of of providing excellent care for our SPED students. And that's why we're having more students come to our district, not only for SPED, but for every other district. So this is our budget that we currently have. Now, you have a booklet that was given to you on Friday. It's a detailed budget. We can ask questions here, or at the end of the presentation, if you have any specific questions, we can go over them. Also, when we get, you have it, you have until May the 9th to maybe ask us any additional questions, and we have them. But what you'll see is a lot of our increases are certainly in instruction. We got $10 million in instruction because of additional teachers, increase in compensation, increase in healthcare, as well as we're adding increase in technology equipment for the one-on-one initiatives. Now, there's a decrease in function 13, that's staff development. This current year, we allocated some additional funding for the Sean Kane staff development. We may do something again, but at this point, you have a revised budget, and it's not in the current year's original budget, and that's why there's a decrease. There's an increase in function 23, which is school leadership. You have an increase in function 34, which is transportation. So you have additional positions there, healthcare, overtime. You have an increase in 51, which is maintenance and repair. 52 is security, additional positions there. There's a decrease in function 53, which is certainly our technology. In our current budget, we have some funds, some contracts that we rolled over for E-rate. They're not in the original budget. Chances are when we roll, whatever we don't spend that has to do with E-rate, we'll roll over those contracts that are there into next year's budget. And then you see function 81, which is infrastructure, there's a decrease. That pertains to the Socorro High School HVAC project. We budgeted some funds, and so that's why that's there, that's lower. The $200,000 that we have, we've got budgeted for new portables. Now, we budget in 51 an additional $300,000 for portables and maintenance. So this is just additional amount over what we usually budget. Now, this is our current scenario. Our revenues are $360 million. Our current budget is $371 million, so we have a deficit of $11.4 million. Now, I want to be clear about something here. Through Dr. Espinosa's guidance, along with the board's guidance, we have over 3 months of operating expenses in reserves. We have the ability to raise the tax rate that nobody else does. We have about 110 days of cash, so we're very liquid. We're financially strong. If we weren't there, if we had 2 months of operating expenses, if we were at $1.04, I guarantee you that we would be bringing you a balanced budget or something very close to that. But we have options. And so I want to just say that things is going to change, okay? So we know for a fact that we have $360 million in revenue. The state is looking at something where perhaps we can get an additional $6 million, okay? So that'll help us to balance the budget, and we can discuss later on whether you want to use something about tax increase to balance it, or we use funding, reserves to balance the budget. But that's for discussion later if you like. I just want to point that out. This is our child nutrition budget. As you can see, this is with respect to revenues. We have $1.1 million increase in our projected revenues for the child nutrition program, primarily in the breakfast program, $136,000 increase, as well as a child nutrition, the lunch program. It's about a 2 to 4% increase. That's how we're trending. Historically, the last couple of years, we've been growing at that rate, so we're budgeting that amount. You'll see a decrease in our, what we call our 51 food service. That's our a la carte. We've seen a decrease in our a la carte sales, so we're budgeting appropriately, and that's why we're decreasing by $107,000. And then our commodities, we have an increase based on what we're collecting currently from the federal government. This is our child nutrition budget. So you'll see that there's an increase in payroll because of salary increases to healthcare, additional positions. With respect to the other ones, we're pretty much cutting back on budgets to either balance the budget or in the 6,600 capital outlay. We have capital budgeted for remodeling of several kitchens at our schools currently. So that's going to be completed in the summer, and that's why we're not budgeting for that for next school year. With respect to our debt service, you'll see that we have a balanced budget. We're budgeting $44.9 million in revenue. Again, increase in our tax collections because of increased property values. A little bit of a decrease in our state funding because of the values that we use from the comptroller's office. Now, you'll see that on our debt service, we have a decrease of $617,000. Our debt service is going down now. We've been at 45, 46 million. So the fact is that it's gonna be it's at 44.9 million. Next year, it's gonna go to 44.8. The following year, it's gonna go to 44.5, and then it's gonna go to about $44 million. So it's starting to go down, and values are starting to go up. So what we can certainly look at, it's just a suggestion that as values go up and our debt service goes down, we can shift over a sliver, quarter, or maybe a fourth of a penny into the M&O side to maybe supplement the revenue side. That's a possibility. Now, our debt service in 22-23 is going to go up to 46 million. And then after that, it goes down to 42 million. So I don't want to get in this game of, I mean, I think if we reduce it, maybe a fourth, maybe go into 98 cents and go down a little bit on the debt service side, we might lose some revenue, about $485,000 in debt service revenue, and generate about $800,000 on the M&O side. But I think it's enough, given our increases in values, to be able to sustain our debt service. That's just a consideration. That's all I'm just asking you to consider, okay? And I wouldn't do this if we were forced to do a tax increase because the legislator didn't do anything. This is only if we don't want to raise the tax rate, because if you're shifting it over, the tax rate stays the same. Okay. This is our workers' comp budget. As you can see, we're not changing it. Pretty much it's held steady. We're probably going to have, we'll probably break even or maybe have like a $200,000 loss, but we're very healthy in the workers' comp. And what you'll see is that our claims are going to stay the same, so to speak. An increase in our healthcare budget for workers' comp. And then in healthcare, we're budgeting about a $4 million increase in our budget, primarily for claims, okay? And we're keeping the revenues aside. Now, we have a balanced budget. We're not going to generate a balance. We're not going to generate, but we've always done this, so maybe in the future we might have an unbalanced budget, but I just want to give you that information. So, now, this is the amount that we have budgeted is 1.5% in our budget currently. And what you have is the breakdown and what the total cost is going to be, the impact. $3.6 million for all funds, okay? Now, the general fund usually represents about 92% of this amount. So you're looking at about $3.3 million impact for the general fund at 1.5%. That's in our budget, it's there. But historically, last couple of years, we've always gone between 1.5%, 2%. So for your information, we're looking at a 2%. We're giving you information on a 2%. So you know what the fiscal impact would be if you want to do that. Total funds, you're looking at about a $1.2 million, $1.3 million increase in funds. And teacher salaries would be at over $1,000. The pay increase would be $1,058, as opposed to 1.5 is $794. Now, last time we met, there was a question of, have we ever cut the budget? Have we looked at cutting the budget? No, sir, I've looked and I haven't reduced the budget. Now, what we've done is we've certainly deferred on adding to the budget, but we've been growing. But at this point in time, when you're growing at 1.5% for the last 2 to 3 years, something's got to give where you've got to provide some additional resources or teaching positions. And you know, if it's the directive of the board to do something about that, we can certainly start looking at the budget. I don't think it's a good idea, personally. I think we'd be maybe a penny wise and maybe a pound foolish. I think it's important for us to continue to provide these services to our kids and our teachers. Now, there is a possible redirection of budget. We looked at our budget. Right now, we've got $2.1 million budgeted for the purchase of laptops, but we are looking at possibly leasing these laptops, which would cost us about $700,000. You do a 4-year lease, it helps to reduce the budget. It helps the pressure on the budget. So we can either cut the budget or we can redirect those funds for something else, should the board desire. And that's just for your information. Now, what we have on the May 9th is we'll talk to see if there's anything with respect to the legislature, if they've decided on whether they're going to approve either House Bill 21 or the Senate or what. So hopefully we'll give you an update. There will be some changes in our revenues. I guarantee you that. So we'll give you an update on that. We'll also say if there's any questions on this booklet. You've got, not only tonight, but you've got this period until the 9th, and even on the 9th, if there's any additional questions that you have, we'll be available to answer those questions. And then we'll discuss the compensation proposal. And the reason for that is because we adopt compensation in the regular board meeting in May. So the 9th is the day that we discuss it and see how the board feels about that, okay? Now, you have here, we've given you a kind of a detailed budget, as we always do, for your information to see if there's any questions that you have with respect to a certain line item. And again, if you don't have it today, will be on the 9th. You can feel free to ask questions at that time, so to speak. But that's what we have with respect to our budget. Are there any questions with respect to the information that we've given you and the data? So what you have is the detailed budget for the three funds, actually the 5 funds that we talked about. We will adopt the general fund, the debt service, and the and the health and the child nutrition fund in June. Our plan is to publish the notice that first week in June of when we're going to have the public hearing to discuss the proposed tax rate, as well as the budget to be adopted. So by that time, hopefully, we'll have some clear indication of what the legislature is going to do, whether they'll provide additional funding for school districts or not. And then we'll go from there. We won't adopt the tax rate until August. So what we usually do is we publish twice. We're not required to. I mean, once you publish in June, theoretically, legally, from my understanding, is that so long as you don't increase the total tax rate or you don't increase the taxes that you're publishing, you can still go forward and have the public hearing and adopt that tax rate or a lower tax rate. What we've always done is we've always still published the public hearing for the August board meeting to adopt the tax rate as well as what that tax rate's going to be. Also keep in mind is that we can publish a certain tax rate, you don't have to adopt it. You can either adopt 0 or something lower than that. Are there any questions?
No questions?
Okay, well, thank you very much.
We did that on purpose, okay?
Did that. Oh, now you're gonna ask me, oh, come on, you guys.
No, I'm good.
It's waiting to see what the legislature does before we know exactly what we have to do.
Yes, ma'am. So again, you have this, if there's any questions you have, feel free to call me, or on the 9th, we can kind of go over those questions.
Thank you, Mr. Ressa. There's no other questions. Meeting's adjourned. The time is 5:58. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Ressa, thank you again for all your work into this and your staff.
Thank you. I want to thank Mrs. Olson and her staff. Appreciate it.
Susan, Tony?
Thank you.